You're standing alone on a pitch at 6 in the morning, and the grass is damp while the air is cold, and the only sound is the rhythmic thud of a ball against a wall. Because you have been told that this is where legends are made, and you have been told that the lonely grind is the price of the contract. So you feel proud of yourself, thinking that because you are awake while your rivals are sleeping, you are winning. And you think that because you have completed 500 repetitions of a ball mastery drill, you have moved closer to the 1%. But you are wrong. And in fact, for many of you, this isolated session is not a bridge to the professional level, but a treadmill that is keeping you exactly where you are. Because you are working hard, but you are working blindly, and you are sweating, but you are not evolving, as you are essentially building a high-performance chassis, but forgetting to install the wiring that allows the driver to see the road. And if you continue to train in this vacuum, treating solo training as a way to feel productive, rather than a way to become a biological anomaly, you will remain a local standout who fails the moment the stakes are raised. Since professional scouts do not care about your grind, they care about your data, your decision-making, and your ability to solve complex problems under fatigue. So if your solo training does not look like a surgical intervention into your own biology, it is nothing more than exercise. And exercise will never get you signed, because there is a pervasive and comforting lie that dominates the football world, which is the myth of the 10,000 touches. And this lie suggests that if you simply perform enough repetitions of a move, like a step over or a Cruyff turn, it will eventually become automatic in a match. But this is the technical masturbation trap, because it feels good to do and looks great on camera, and gives you a temporary surge of dopamine because you feel in control. While the problem is that a match is never controlled, as it is a chaotic and high-speed series of unpredictable variables. And the mainstream belief is that solo training should be about perfecting your technique. But technique does not exist in a vacuum, because technique is only valuable when it is tethered to a decision. And most of you are training your feet, but sedating your brain as you become world-class at executing moves against stationary air, which is exactly why you look like a god in practice, but a ghost in the game. And this lie is dangerous for your career because it builds what neurologists call closed-loop skills. So when you perform a drill that has zero unpredictability, like weaving through cones at the same speed over, and your brain stops processing new data, and it switches to autopilot, entering a state of neural stagnation where you are building myelin around a circuit that is useless for elite football. Because in a real match, you are never just dribbling as you are scanning a defender's center of gravity and listening to a teammate's shout and managing your own heart rate and calculating the geometry of the space. And if your solo training has zero cognitive load, you are training your brain to be silent when it needs to be screaming with data, which creates the practice game gap where you have the skill, but you lack the trigger so you can perform the move. But you don't know the exact millisecond of the defender's lunging motion that requires it. And furthermore, mindless solo training creates a false sense of security, making you think you are working on your game so you don't feel the urgency to change while you spend years doing the same comfortable drills as your rivals in professional academies are being forced into high-frequency decision-making sessions. And you are wasting your peak years of neuroplasticity on participation when you should be focused on programming. So, by the time you realize that your solo training didn't translate, the age window is shut, and you are 20 years old with great feet and a slow brain, which makes you structurally unteachable. Because the reality of elite performance is that solo training must be an act of neurological engineering, where you understand the OODA loop, which stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And most solo training only focuses on the act phase. But in the professional game, the act is the easiest part, since the war is won in the first 3 phases of observation and orientation and decision. And if your solo training does not force you to observe and decide, it is not football training, because elite solo work is built on the principle of myelin insulation, which is the protein that wraps around your neural circuits. And for myelin to wrap, effectively, the rep must be struggled, as no myelin is added if the drill is easy. So you must be at the edge of your ability, where you are failing at least 20% of the time, since this is where the brain signals that the current hardware is insufficient and needs an upgrade, which is the Neymar frequency. Because Japanese neurologists found that Neymar's brain is almost silent during complex movements, as he has so much myelin insulation that his motor cortical recruitment is minimal. And he isn't thinking because he has already pre-solved the problem millions of times in high-pressure environments like street football and futsal. And you must also understand the refresh rate of the brain, because elite players scan the field every 2 to 3 seconds, while most of you scan once every 10 seconds, meaning your mental map of the game is old and expired data. And if your solo training doesn't include a scanning trigger, you are training your brain to stay locked on the ball, which is a habit that is a death sentence at the professional level. And you can see this in the development of Lamine Yamal, who at 17 is solving tactical problems that 30-year-old veterans struggle with, because his solo work and academy work were never about the ball, but about the negative space, as he was trained to look at where the ball isn't, and his brain was built to perceive triangles and vectors rather than cones and drills. So he doesn't have better genetics than you, but he has a more efficient operating system. And you can see this in Cristiano Ronaldo, who would go to the back of the training ground alone, but he didn't just juggle, as he would put weights on his ankles to increase the neural drive required for his stepovers. And he was intentionally adding friction to his training so that the match felt weightless, and he was engineering his central nervous system to fire at a higher intensity than the game required by training over capacity. While most of you train under capacity, by doing drills that are easier than the match at 70% intensity, with long breaks and scrolling on your phone between sets, which trains your body to be lazy under pressure. But Ronaldo was training his body to be explosive under fatigue, because he understood that the solo session is the only time you can hyper-focus on a specific biological bottleneck. So he attacked his weaknesses with the precision of a surgeon. And if you want to be elite, your solo training must transition from drills to protocols, where you first eliminate the autopilot by using a visual or auditory trigger, like a phone app that flashes a color or a partner who shouts a command, so you react to a signal rather than a pre-planned route, which forces the brain to run the OODA loop. And second, you must use a scanning trigger. So every time you touch the ball, your head must move. And every 3 seconds, you must identify an object behind you. Because if you don't scan in training, you won't scan in the game. And third, you must focus on the 80-20 weapon, where you stop trying to be a generalist and identify your superpower that will get you signed, as 80% of your solo work should be on this weapon, until it is undeniable. And fourth, you must maintain structural integrity, because you cannot execute elite software on broken hardware. So if you are sitting at a desk all day, you must perform the hydraulic reset of hydration and photon exposure and fascial activation to ensure your nervous system is hot and ready to learn. And fifth, you must use match simulation intensity, where a solo session is shorter but more violent. So you train for 40 minutes at 110% until you reach biological failure, where your technique begins to break down, since that is where the growth happens. But this level of intentionality is exhausting, and most of you are not doing it because you would rather have the feeling of a long session than the result of a hard one. Which is also why your nutrition is failing you, as you are training your brain to process data at elite speeds, but fueling it with processed sugar and inflammatory oils, making your brain fog a nutritional choice. So I have created a free nutrition and recovery cheat sheet that is the exact fuel map for the elite brain, ensuring your neurons fire at maximum velocity and your muscles recover while you sleep, which is the first step in fixing your hardware. But if you want the full system of the 12-week periodized schedule that organizes your speed and power and cognitive training into a pro-level architecture, you need the 12-week Elite Blueprint for $27. Because one choice feeds your laziness while the other feeds your career. And you have now heard the truth, knowing that your current solo training is likely a waste of time, and that you have been training your feet while neglecting your brain, and that the window is closing so hard, work is not enough. But knowing is not performing. And most of you will finish this video and do nothing, as you go back to the same field and do the same cone drills, telling yourself that you want it while you are lying to yourself. Because if you wanted it, you would change your protocol today and stop seeking the comfort of the repetitive drill to start seeking the pain of the cognitive struggle, as the professional level is for the obsessed who treat their life like a laboratory and their training like a war, since scouts are looking for a biological anomaly who can dictate the game. So you are either building that anomaly or you are participating in your own failure. And when the alarm goes off tomorrow at 5:30, you will either execute the protocol or you will hit snooze and accept your place in the 99% as the blueprint and the fuel map and the truth are all available. So the only variable left is you, and you need to go work.